y'all, Scott here. Poverty! No thanks. I have my favorite way to spend $1,000 right here, and it has all my favorite console games available on it. There are so many great console games to play here. I can play Sonic. Ready? I'm about to show you something terrifying. I already pissed myself. The idea of having one singular product that can do really anything you want, play movies, music, go online, make calls, send text messages, and play video games was something dreams were made of. I don't need a DVD player, iPod, or physician because the smartphone does it all. Yes, iPhone, Android, Windows Phone. Smartphones were cool back in the day, especially when they were more of a luxury rather than a necessity. Yeah, this thing has a 12 megapixel camera, who gives a shit? Pretty obvious we take all this for granted now, but back then the idea of having something this tiny just to watch movies on was mind-blowing. I remember seeing the first iPhone commercials and I was like, this looks absolutely amazing. It starts at $500. That's hilarious. Like, no thanks, I don't need to touch Fandango. However, these things started to get way more affordable as time went on. I was personally weaned on an iPod Touch, the classic iPhone without the phone, i.e. the iPhone for an 8th grader. This thing was awesome. I could play all these movies and TV shows and songs and download all these apps and games. But with smartphones lowering in cost, I was finally able to get an iPhone 4 in 2012, and the magic of this all-in-one super thin and tiny device kind of wore off by then. However, as new models kept coming out every year, the iPhone and other smartphones increasingly had more and more potential when it came to graphically intensive apps. You could run things on these devices that were originally unheard of to be played on such a small guy. Because of that, developers were able to port over some of their games from home consoles onto smartphones, and that's how some of the magic of the all-in-one nature of the iPhone initially came back into play for me. I can play Grand Theft Auto 3 on my phone on the school bus. That's amazing! Console games on mobile devices. This is a topic I have a lot of experience with. Back in my high school days, I was super keen on having everything possible on my iPhone at all times. Just so then, when I'm bored, then I have all my favorite console games available on this thing and the 3rd season of Wings, I'm set. The idea of having all these games originally from home consoles on my smartphone at all times with no extra accessories or anything needed, and just being able to whip out my phone and play GTA San Andreas whenever I wanted to, that was amazing. But it also didn't work out as well as I wanted it to. My high school years were from the Wii U's launch in 2012 to Star Fox Zero's release in 2016. The rest was a blur. But I do know from the start, a fair amount of kids had smartphones. By the end, I mean, everybody owned one. What, you didn't want to be called a fucking loser? Because of that, during my high school years personally, teachers just kind of gave up on regulating cell phone usage. I mean, like, of course you couldn't use them during a test or during a lecture, but when the teacher was just sitting at their desk or during study hall, hell yeah, man, break out puzzle bits. I was never a huge mobile gamer, but because of high school being worthless and having so much downtime during classes and study hall specifically, those were the years I played mobile games the most, and I noticed the most popular ones were always stupid simple. Stuff like Flappy Bird, Trivia Crack, these dumb games. Geometry Dash, Jetpack Joyride, Subway Surfers, Flappy Golf, the best one. I mean, everybody played games on their smartphones, so obviously the mobile market was something all the big game developers looked at back in 2011 saying, well, we know what we're doing tonight. All of these companies acted like the future of gaming was going to be on mobile. Consoles are dying, this was where the money was. I mean, to be honest, back then, I wouldn't blame them for thinking this. An iPhone 4S could run Infinity Blade 2, that's still a pretty decent looking game today and was made by Epic Games basically just to show off how powerful the iPhone could be for gaming. These things could run fairly intensive games and were owned by basically everybody on the planet, so yeah, back then it made sense for some of them to think about shifting focus to mobile. Why make a new Mega Man for consoles when you can make whatever the hell this was? As time went on, however, the more these console developers made games for mobile devices, it was apparent they didn't really know why people played mobile games. They just kind of made either dumbed down versions of their franchises or just mobile versions of console games. Like, they just thought, well, we have this well-known IP, we put this on a platform with an install base of hundreds of millions of users, and there we go, we win. It's pretty obvious the App Store isn't nearly as simple as they thought it was. It's a ridiculously complicated ecosystem. Just because everybody owns a smartphone doesn't mean your game will do nearly as well as it would do on console sometimes. Newcomer developers who only really made smartphone games ended up overshadowing the big guys like EA and Capcom. These guys developed simple, intuitive games made for touchscreen controls, while EA just kind of barfed out Dead Space for iPhone. Of course, now a lot of big name developers have figured out the mobile space, which is why we don't see a mobile version of Rayman 2 anymore, we see Rayman Jungle Run. These console game conversions really didn't suit the mobile market, and they've died out considerably over the years. Like I said, I used to be stupid into the idea of playing these games on my Wonder Slab, so I would generally download any big home console to iPhone game I could find, and normally if they were on sale. However, after scouring through my previously purchased apps, most of these games are lost to time. They've been delisted from the App Store or are no longer supported by the current version of iOS. That's a good sign. Just a few of the ones that are no longer available that I remember. Dead Rising Mobile, this stunk. Clunky and the draw distance of the zombies was just garbage. This was a situation where they could barely do Dead Rising on mobile, but they probably should have waited until they could kinda do Dead Rising on mobile. Burnout Crash. Yeah, this was the Burnout game that came out where people said that's not Burnout. Crash mode was one of the most fun parts of these games, just trying to create the biggest crash you can. Burnout Crash is basically this entire mode, but from an overhead perspective and at a much slower pace, which takes a lot of, if not most of the fun out of Crash mode. The mobile version was pretty similar to the console releases on Xbox Live Arcade and PSN, and I'd argue this worked fairly well as a mobile game. It didn't make it a great game, but it felt well suited for mobile. The Simpsons Arcade, not The Simpsons Arcade, The Simpsons Arcade. This was a reimagining of the original Konami game from 1991. It's obviously based off of the idea of that game, but it's not the same, and it kind of feels more like a scam calling it The Simpsons Arcade. They knew what they were doing, and I'm sure tons of people downloaded this expecting to play the original arcade game and went, oh. Resident Evil 4 Platinum. I know I just totally dogged on Dead Rising Mobile, but for Resident Evil 4 on the iPhone back in 2009, I mean, it works as well as you'd expect it to. I think Dead Rising was far more subpar. This wasn't a good way to play Resident Evil 4 and felt more like Capcom saying, look what we can do, we can put Resident Evil 4 on your phone, we're fucking crazy. They obviously did it to milk Resident Evil 4 for all it's worth, to release a big name game like this on the iPhone, to get attention. They didn't release it because they thought the game would work well on the iPhone. But it was fairly novel to have a somewhat faithful mobile version of this game, and it worked to some extent. There was also Resident Evil Mercenaries Versus, a game more suited for quick mobile gameplay in my opinion. Battlefield Bad Company 2! That wasn't the worst. That's just scratching the surface of all the junk that's been taken down. There was stuff like Mirror's Edge, which was a 2D platformer. Yeah, that's not Mirror's Edge. Driver, that blew. Guitar Hero, that was actually pretty good. Lego Harry Potter, Doom, Wolfenstein, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. You'd think that by now, the console games that were left up on the App Store would be fairly high quality. I mean, they must have left them up for a reason. Well, joke's on you, I just bought Devil May Cry 4 Refrain. This was released back in 2011, and I have no clue why Resi 4 and Dead Rising were taken down, but this lives on. DMC4 Refrain is fundamentally a super toned down version of DMC4. And first, let me say, Devil May Cry wasn't the first series I wanted on the iPhone. We have a fake analog stick and a vast array of fake buttons. Comparing it side by side with the console version, it covers some of the same ground, but overall it's a much slower, dumbed down, clunky alternative. Story is told through text only, models are at a far lower resolution. This feels like a relic of the past, a mobile game from back in the day that somehow is still available to purchase. The whole touchscreen analog stick or D-pad sort of thing just doesn't work the greatest, but it varies from game to game. There are some games which are just an absolute train wreck to play with a touchscreen, but then there are others which work surprisingly okay, though they're still not great. You get no tactile feedback, and your fingers almost always cover the screen, making it hard to see everything. You're controlling your character with glass. You can get used to it. I mean, it's obvious these games weren't made with a control scheme like this in mind. Now, to be fair, the Sonic the Hedgehog games with this control layout work pretty alright. Most of the time in 2D Sonic games, you're just holding forward and hitting jump. It's not nearly as precise or involved as other platformers, plus you only use one button, so touchscreen controls, while not ideal, work fine enough. Sonic 1, 2, and CD were all released on mobile, courtesy of Christian Whitehead, who worked on these versions and then upgraded to developing Sonic Mania. He really hit it out of the park with these re-releases, making them widescreen, giving them higher frame rates, new playable characters. Sonic 2 featured Hidden Palace Zone, a stage that was cut from the original game. These are the best ways to play these classic games. And 1 and 2 are only available on mobile. The Sonic CD remaster came out on consoles. I don't know what the deal with 1 and 2 are. Yes, the best versions of Sonic 1 and 2 deserve the best place to play them. A fucking phone. Now, Sonic 1 and 2 were actually originally released on mobile years before they were updated to be the Christian Whitehead versions. Yeah, these weren't great. Sonic Spinball was originally on the App Store, but was later delisted. Damn it! But thankfully, the mobile ports of Sonic 4 remain. Sonic 4 Episodes 1 and 2 aren't great games. These were released alongside the console releases of their respective episodes, and weirdly enough, they've fully updated Sonic's model at some point in Episode 1. And honestly, I think because of this, Sonic 4 Episode 1 on mobile now looks better than the console versions. The original release looked perfectly fine in terms of being a mobile version of Sonic 4, as Sonic's model was a bit blocky, but now it looks pretty decent. Doesn't help the fact that it's still, you know, Sonic 4. But if you want to play this game, the mobile release is better than I remember. I do think the touch controls are way worse here than the Christian Whitehead re-releases, but hey, it's Sonic 4, I'm not going to be playing this again, who cares? Well, thank God, you can play with tilt controls. That was everybody's problem with Sonic 4 on consoles. They listen, guys. Now, Sega has this new mobile initiative called Sega Forever, where they make their mobile games free, but with ads, which you can remove by paying for the game. They've made a lot of their classic titles a part of Sega Forever. Tons of these were actually released a while back, much like Sonic 1, 2, and Pinball. And they were all obviously cut from the same cloth, featuring the same virtual Genesis D-pad and buttons. Now you can play them all for free with ads, which is honestly pretty cool. But they also made some more modern games and games exclusively made for mobile a part of Sega Forever. Super Monkey Ball. This was one of the first games shown off for the iPhone. If you remember, the App Store didn't make its debut until 2008, and this was one of the headlining debut games. For $10, Jesus. I remember this one never controlled very well. You had to tilt your phone and it never felt calibrated properly. And the monkey was just a 2D sprite inside a ball. Now that's resourceful. This version has since been delisted, but we have another Monkey Ball game still available, which is free, a part of Sega Forever. Super Monkey Ball Sakura Edition is pretty much just a new and improved version of the original Super Monkey Ball mobile game. Better graphics and better controls, but they still require you to tilt your phone. Why do they feel the need with every Monkey Ball mobile game to require me to tilt my phone? I get tilting a Wii remote to play Monkey Ball, but tilting the entire screen just ends up making it harder to see what's actually going on most of the time and just gives me a headache. I wish they had an option to use a digital analog stick, but hey, this Monkey Ball game does show me ads after every level, so that counts for something. Dude, communism, yeah. Now sometimes these mobile conversions of console games can be quite a bit different from the original. Sonic Forces on the App Store is a variation of the mobile game Sonic Dash, just now with a Sonic Forces theme. The Need for Speed games are definitely a bit different from their console versions, but hey, racing games definitely work on mobile far better than a lot of other genres. Injustice basically feels like a made from the ground up mobile version of the console release. They basically focused on swiping and tapping the screen for moves, and it works way better than if they just smacked Injustice on the iPhone. You know, if they just downgraded the graphics considerably, put a digital stick and buttons on it, and called it a day. Street Fighter 4. You know, Capcom has tried to put a lot of their fighting games on mobile, and a lot of them have been delisted over time. Street Fighter 2 Collection, Street Fighter 4, 4 Volt, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. There was this app called the Capcom Arcade, which included a ton of Capcom Arcade games, most of which were just Street Fighter 2. But here we have Street Fighter 4 Champion Edition, the only one still available on the App Store. Jesus! Everything is so damn low quality. I'm no Street Fighter aficionado, but a fighting game like this does not work very well with no actual buttons or sticks. Some games work alright with the digital control layout, and some games are Street Fighter 4. If they just had to put Street Fighter 4 on mobile, they should have gone the Injustice route and designed something from the ground up, not do a straight conversion of the console release. Also, this thing wasn't properly formatted for iPhone 10s. What are they trying to tell me? Can't see. Capcom's had a messy history with console games on mobile, and my first experience with that was with the original Mega Man 2. This got slammed in reviews, and yes, Mega Man doesn't work very well with the digital D-pad. The game had a portrait mode with this arcade frame. This was cute and garbage. There's no room for your thumbs to use the stick and buttons, it gets cramped. In landscape mode, it was tolerable for me. I remember not being able to do the bird trick, where you hold A and B after selecting a robot master and the stars turn to birds. If I held A and B in the mobile game, it just froze until I let them go. I can see where the low review scores came from. But I got fairly far in this version on a car trip. It wasn't great, but it was fine enough. Capcom delisted this one and didn't update it to work with newer iPhones. I will be dead in the ground before I delete this off my phone. However, in 2017, they released Mega Man 1 through 6 for mobile. I can play all of them. I downloaded Mega Man 1 and holy shit, this is even worse than the original Mega Man 2 for mobile. You can adjust the speed of the game, but all three of the speeds are terrible. The normal speed is very in line with how fast the original was, but the frame rate is awful. With the two faster speeds, they just feel unnatural. This isn't how I want to play Mega Man. Instead of figuring out how to make a good mobile version of Mega Man 2, or just deciding that mobile doesn't suit the game well, they make worse versions of all the NES games. I also just don't get all the small little edits they made to the game. Like, why is the health bar down in the corner now? Well, Mega Man X is on the App Store too, and holy sh**, I don't know which is worse. Why did they redo all the sprites? This looks like an online Flash game. This feels like a poor man's Mega Man X, and I really don't know why they felt the need to make everything feel so much cheaper and lamer. The original Mega Man 2 release for iPhone came out well before this version of Mega Man X. At least they retained the original graphics. Why they made this game the way it is will always perplex me. Call of Duty World at War Zombies was a big game on mobile. Instead of being a full-blown Call of Duty game, it was just the Zombies mode where you had to survive as long as possible. I played this a few times in study hall, but like any 3D iPhone game, this tore through battery life. It's been delisted and now we have Black Ops Zombies. It's pretty similar. Controls are decent enough. FPSs work far better on mobile than I would ever expect them to be honest. And it probably helped that this was specifically made for mobile and not just a straight port of a console game. Speaking of which, Rockstar has brought over tons of their PS2 era games to mobile. Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, San Andreas, even the more obscure ones like Liberty City Stories, the PSP game that later came to PS2. Plus Bully and Max Payne. Sure, we've played downgraded to hell PS3 and 360 games, and old 2D games as well, but full-blown PS2 era games on your phone wherever you go. That was an amazing thought to me. Grand Theft Auto 3 released on the App Store back in 2011, and I immediately bought it. I picked up all the GTAs when they released on mobile, and I would start playing them for about 10 minutes and kind of stopped. These are fine versions of these games. Everything's here and they all work well. They just don't feel right or nearly as fun on the iPhone. Maybe it's the lack of actual buttons, and no tactile feedback takes a lot of the fun and fluidness out of the controls. You don't get the same impact crashing your car by moving your thumbs on a glass screen as you would holding an actual button and moving an actual analog stick. The entire layout changes when you enter a car. There's a lot of things you can do in Grand Theft Auto, and to have to focus so much on where certain buttons are when they change a fair amount, to have all this crowd up the screen, to have your fingers covering up 40% of it all, it's a bit much. I would get super excited to see these games playable on my phone, but they're just not nearly as fun to play here as they are on a console in my opinion. Chinatown Wars preceded all these games and was the first GTA on iPhone. This was a port of the DS and PSP game, and honestly, it worked a bit better than the 3D games. Being overhead and already being designed for portable devices with some touchscreen functionality in mind, made for a better mobile game in my opinion. But you know what I said when the iPhone came out? Where's BioShock? This was one of the most bizarre phone conversions out there to me. In 2014, 2K announced they put BioShock on mobile. The full game. Like, kudos to them for getting BioShock to work on mobile, but who asked for this? I need names. This is the last game I would have expected on the iPhone. A first-person shooter with an emphasis on story. I love those things on my iPod Touch. They stopped supporting it in 2017, which is unfortunate. This is a really cool oddity of a release, but I can see why it's no more. Of course, there's stuff like all the Telltale games, Minecraft, Fortnite, and various others. I actually played a lot of Ace Attorney on mobile, and stuff like Pokemon Shuffle works better on mobile than it did on the 3DS. You also have a ton of Final Fantasy games going for prices I didn't even know were possible on the App Store. But the concept of playing console games on mobile has died down a bit over the past few years, especially considering the PSP, Vita, and 3DS started to bring more and more console experiences to handhelds, and then the Nintendo Switch completely flattened any desire for console games on the iPhone. Mobile games do specific things very well. They're simple, addictive, and easy to quickly whip out, which is why now if we see a big game franchise come to mobile, it's usually more smartly designed for mobile. I've had nightmares about some digital D-pads, so it's nice to see they're not as common as they used to be. Now, you may say, for a lot of these games, if you don't want a digital D-pad, why not use a Bluetooth controller? Most of these apps support them. That is true, however, in my opinion, a lot of the appeal of something like Grand Theft Auto Vice City on your phone is the fact that you can play this wherever you go with no catches. A lot of that appeal disappears when you have to bring a controller with you places. Most of the time, console games are best left on actual consoles, and while it's cool to see some of them go portable, it's not always worth the downgrades and the control issues, which is why the Nintendo Switch is so fun, portable home console games with no control issues. Maybe lesser graphics, but hey, whatever. These were cool little oddities for a while, but their time has passed, and now it's nicer to see mobile games specifically designed for mobile. But thank God Carnival games came to iPhone. Now, like I said, you could buy a controller and set your phone up as if it was a console, but at that point, just buy a fucking Switch. But mobile phones do have a pro to them compared to the Switch. They have Atari Fit,